So the thing that I'd start with here is with the title. This is very clear and succinct title, explains what they built and what it enables. So that's a very good model. The abstract is very short here, but it effectively, I think, introduces the project. So they say what is new and what they are trying to do and accomplish. Then they explain their design in this sentence, and then the next sentence continues talking about their design. Here, they talk about the result. The result of this project is they dropped the robot a whole bunch of times, and the robot was able to get itself in the right direction. And then they also have this additional result right here that they're showing that how it compares to a wheeled thing. If you were struggled out to find where in the paper they talked about this modeling approach, I also struggled, but I figured out that it was in figures 4 and 5, but that took me a while. But overall, I think the abstract does do a good job emphasizing what the writers think is most important, and I find it pretty easy to follow. The introduction here does a good job introducing us to the problems that these researchers are trying to solve. It roughly follows the novelty moves, but not exactly. So first they kind of explain the broad overall trend of what is going on within robotic designs. And then the big problem. This is the big overall problem that they are trying to solve. And in robotics, one of the biggest problems that everybody's trying to solve is robots fall over. So that's basically the big problem here. Um, these robots, so they describe the status quo, but then they say, what's missing from this? And in particular, that large disturbances can knock the robot over. So if we're going to get a robot that could be as adaptive, as agile as the natural world, we need to develop this. Now, in this next paragraph, what the writers really do is they explain where the inspiration for their design comes from. So I'd ask the student writer if they also have a similar inspiration. So these researchers are referring to studies from the natural world and how these studies kind of inspired their design. And here they make it really clear that this is what inspired them. And then I would note to the student, figure 1 here, this is a very nice figure that really kind of encapsulates what they're trying to emulate in the lizard tail. So if the writer also has a similar type project, I would highly recommend that they include a picture like this. And I would also note, look at this caption. It's pretty well explained, and the captions in this paper tend to go for a couple sentences. So I tell the writer, go ahead and take some space here. Now, this concept of zero net angular momentum kind of comes out of nowhere, so I wouldn't have the student emulate that. But what I understand this to be is this is what they're trying to achieve with with the lizard tail. And so they're explaining where that has been done or attempted elsewhere. And one thing that they do is that by the very end of the section here, there's really kind of narrowing down onto the type of robot design that is closest to what they are doing, uh, but is still limited, that they rely that these have tails and they do some of the balancing and stability that these researchers are trying to emulate, but that it relies on passive contact, and they want to develop something that doesn't rely on contact. Something I would note to the student is that they use a hypothesis here. We hypothesize that we can expand the basin of stability, and so I might recommend that the student also sort of frame their project as a hypothesis. We hypothesize that we are able to use this inspiration to accomplish this physical task, in this case zero net angular momentum. Then at the end of the introduction, they preview the rest of the paper. So that might be something the student wants to do. The next section, they're explaining how they built the thing, and they've broken it into all these sections here. Oh, and this is describing the modeling. Here's where they really go into the robot design. So first they do kind of a proof of concept, saying that according to some simulations, the tail ought to really work. And now they're explaining how they designed it and kind of different chunks of the project. And right here, they're giving us some detail on what they did and what the exact specifications are of this. Then let's go to the results section here. So it is titled Experimental Results, and here the method and results are all subheadings under the results section. So they have the experimental methods section, and it's very short. I think just a paragraph, two paragraphs long. And then they explain all the things they did to test this robot. And I see a lot of language here, like to verify uh, that the model is predictive. We did this, and then we found this. They introduce falling, and so then to test whether or not it can work with a pure fall, we suspended the robot and then explain what the robot did. And here they use several figures to show. This right here is clearly falling from the wall. So they really use these images here to demonstrate, like, okay, the robot managed to get itself started up upside down, and now it's right side up. So these figures are really, I think, pretty persuasive here. And in this results section, each of the headings is a different task that they tried to get the robot to perform. Again, the figures make it pretty clear what it is that the robot was or was not able to do. In this section here, they kind of end with talking about something that it performed okay. It landed safely, but it had kind of a rough start. So they explain what they might be able to do to fix that. Then let's look at the conclusion. It's pretty short. They began by explaining what it is that they designed, and then they go over all the results, what their robot can do. Then they explain that it has some advantages over the status quo, and then they briefly go into future work and what could be a possible next step. So with this writer, if the writer were using this as a model essay, I would get them to emulate the abstract, really do like what the introduction here does is really kind of foreground explain the problem sort of at the big level of what they're trying to address, and the more specific explain the inspiration or what they're trying to model from the natural world in order to make the robot work better. Uh, then I would talk about the use of figures and captions here and how that really helps convey the story and helps us understand this. I talk about do the experiment, go ahead and looks like go ahead and combine the methods and results into one section, include images of these results, and have a short and sweet conclusion here. And so this can be a good way to show, to kind of work with variation in a session and spend some time with the writer kind of figuring out what a model essay does and what they might want to emulate.